before the world knew science, before humankind dared to challenge the gods, a young man from a small town called Stagira dared to ask one simple question that shook everything. Why? Aristotle was not born a noble. He was merely a seeker of meaning in a world full of blind belief. In an age when lightning was seen as Zeus's wrath and disease as a curse, Aristotle saw something greater, patterns. He believed that everything that exists has a cause, and from cause knowledge is born. He walked along the beaches of Lesbos, observing stars, fish, and falling leaves. He did not write about miracles, but about mechanisms. For him, the world was not a myth, but a puzzle waiting to be solved by the human mind. When his teacher Plato said that the real world was merely a shadow of perfect ideas, Aristotle refused. He said, "I believe in what I can see, not in shadows." And with that sentence, he lit the first flame of science in the world. Other philosophers called him insane. They said he insulted the teachings of the gods. But Aristotle did not care. He knew, to find truth one must be brave enough to fight against comforting myths. From one simple question, why, was born a way of thinking that now powers computers, guides spaceships, and shapes the modern world. Every human decision, from choosing a president to pressing a computer, owes its existence to one thing created 2,000 years ago. Aristotle's logic. At the Academy of Athens, Aristotle sat with his head bent over a papyrus scroll. He was not writing poetry, but formulas. Not formulas of numbers, but formulas of thought. He believed that the human mind could be built like architecture, with foundations, walls and roofs, all arranged by cause and effect. He created what we now call syllogism, way of reasoning, that made the world stop debating with emotion and start thinking with evidence. A simple example: all men are mortal. Socrates is a man. Therefore Socrates is mortal. This logic seems simple, but from it were born science, law, and even modern computers. In his time, he was mocked for believing that truth could be measured. But Aristotle knew, only through logic can mankind pierce the fog of ignorance. And now, every time a machine thinks, every time an algorithm decides something, it is not a miracle of technology. It is merely the echo of the logic of a man who lived 2 millennia ago, when the world was divided between those who thought and those who worked. Aristotle did both. He thought about how the world works. He dissected animals, noted their behavior, observed the movement of stars, measured the shadow of the sun, and wrote down his findings with hands trembling with curiosity. For Aristotle, there was no boundary between philosophy and science. To think without evidence was arrogance. To see without reflection was blindness. He laid the foundations of biology, meteorology, physics, and psychology, thousands of years before those words existed. He believed that to understand nature is to understand oneself. For man, he said, is not the master of the cosmos, but part of its order. People mocked his obsession with studying animals and plants. But Aristotle knew every living being carries the same secret: purpose. From every fish heart and bird wing he observed, he realized that life was not random. It was the logic of nature itself. Before Alexander conquered the world with his sword, his mind was first conquered by Aristotle. In the palace of Pella, Aristotle stood before a fiery young boy, Alexander. He did not teach him how to fight, but how to think. About ethics, rhetoric, geography, and strategy. He said, "He who rules his mind will rule the world." Every word sank deep into Alexander's soul. When his armies crossed the Tigris River, when he conquered Persia, his mind moved with Aristotle's principles. Think before acting. Understand before striking. Their relationship was more than teacher and student. It was the meeting of two poles of power. One ruled the physical world, the other ruled the world of thought. And when Alexander finally conquered almost the entire world, he merely repeated Aristotle's first lesson. True conquest is not of land, but of the mind. In philosophy, there has never been a greater war. A war between heaven and earth, between shadow and reality. Plato believed that the true world was a world of ideas, perfect, untouched, eternal. But Aristotle looked at the stone beneath his feet and said, "Reality is this." That debate divided history. Is truth above the heavens or within the real world? For Aristotle, truth must be observed, measured, and tested. He rejected abstract dreams that could not be touched by human experience. And from that defiance, the first scientific method was born: observe, analyze, conclude. The philosophers of Athens called him a traitor. He left Plato's academy with his head held high, refusing to bow to any idea that could not be proven. And thousands of years later, the modern world took his side. Not Plato's world of shadows, but Aristotle's world of reality. No palaces, no temples, only a garden. And from that garden, a new civilization of thought was born. Aristotle founded the Lyceum, a school without kings or castes. He taught while walking under trees, with open discussions for all. His students wrote, asked, challenged, and thought. It was not a classroom, it was a revolution. He rejected authority and made reason the highest law. To Aristotle, education was not about filling the mind, but about lighting a fire inside it. Athens feared free thought. Politicians accused him of blasphemy, and eventually Aristotle had to leave the city he loved. But his ideas did not leave with him. And from that small garden in Greece was born a civilization that changed the world. Because one mind dared to teach that freedom begins with the courage to think. For Aristotle, knowledge without virtue was simply destruction waiting to happen. He wrote of eudaimonia, the highest happiness. Not pleasure, not wealth, but balance between thought and action. Aristotle believed man is good not because he knows, but because he chooses to act rightly. His philosophy was not for gods, but for humans struggling in the real world. He taught that morality was not a law of heaven, but the practice of a mind constantly seeking the middle ground. Courage without foolishness, simplicity without laziness. In a world where truth was bought by power, Aristotle stood against the current, writing ethics not to rule but to live with meaning. And even now, in every debate of right and wrong, the echo of his voice remains. The middle way is the way of wisdom. When the world believed the earth was held by titans, Aristotle said no, the earth follows its own laws. He wrote about motion, air, fire, water, and earth. He measured the speed of falling objects, studied light, analyzed sound. He did not just think, he observed. With the primitive tools of his time, Aristotle discovered patterns of nature, with precision that rivals modern scientists. He was wrong in some things, but his essence was right. Nature obeys laws, not miracles. To the priests of the gods, this was blasphemy. But to the future, it was the beginning of freedom of thought. And every time a scientist today writes hypothesis, they are thinking in the way of Aristotle. Not as prophets, but as humans seeking meaning in the laws of nature. Kings are forgotten, temples crumble. But the shadow of one philosopher still lives in every thinking mind. For thousands of years, Aristotle's writings were copied, lost, rediscovered, and copied again. Each generation found itself within his words. From Baghdad to Rome, from Paris to Harvard, from ink to data, his thought refuses to die. When the church banned his works, scientists hid them. When wars burned libraries, some of his manuscripts somehow survived. He did not need a body to live. Thought was enough. And now, in the 21st century, his name is not only in history books, but in every system of logic built by mankind. Aristotle did not die. He evolved with the human mind itself. The modern world stands upon the shoulders of one ancient thinker. Logic, biology, politics, ethics, every branch of human knowledge springs from the same root, Aristotle. He taught mankind how to think, not what to think, and that is the highest form of freedom. From a student of Plato, he became the teacher of the world. From a small town, he lit a torch that never went out. Every discovery, every idea, every algorithm is just a continuation of the journey he began thousands of years ago. Without a palace, without an army, without a throne, he conquered the world with the most dangerous weapon of all, logic. And now, as humanity creates artificial intelligence, we are merely repeating what he once taught, how to make the mind think for itself.